A single voice tore through the ceiling of the Prudential Center, and it belonged to Kim Seokjin. How did one man, alone on a stage, command over 19,000 hearts and make an entire arena tremble with emotion? At the second night of Jin Live in Newark, under the monumental banner of the Run Seokjin_EP tour, the BTS member delivered a performance so powerful, so emotionally raw, and so vocally untouchable that even the most composed spectators were left breathless. The crowd did not merely cheer. They roared, cried, and clung to every note as if it were their last. And that stage, meant to host music, became a vessel for something far beyond entertainment. It was a declaration of Jin's unstoppable force as a solo artist. In a venue that was officially sold out weeks prior, every square inch of the Prudential Center pulsed with anticipation hours before the show began. Fans arrived dressed in silver, pink, and deep moonlight purple, a tribute to Jin's signature aesthetic, and waited outside under a burning sun, many in tears even before stepping inside. What were they expecting? A concert? Or a reckoning of emotions they had long kept hidden since Jin's enlistment and temporary silence in the industry? Once inside, the energy was deafening. The crowd swelled in number and in spirit. Lights dimmed, and the first haunting strains of Moon echoed throughout the dome. But it wasn't until Jin himself appeared, stepping into the light, that the full magnitude of the moment became clear. Newark wasn't merely witnessing a concert, it was witnessing history. Jin stood alone, mic in hand, face radiant with intensity, and opened the night not with spectacle, but with strength. His vocals rang out like crystal, soaring into the rafters and down into the chests of thousands. Every note was deliberate. Every breath carried weight. This wasn't idle fan service. It was a vocalist proving why his voice belongs not just to BTS, but to the world stage. Jin's rendition of Epiphany stunned even longtime fans with its depth and control. The quiet, aching phrases contrasted sharply with the explosive high notes, and when he hit the climax, the entire audience rose in a unified wave, as if physically pulled to their feet by his voice alone. What's more staggering is how Jin handled the emotional gravity of the evening. This was not just a musical showcase. It was his moment of return, of affirmation, of visibility in a post-military reality. There were no backing dancers, no distraction. Jin was the show. And that fact wasn't just accepted by the fans. It was celebrated. They screamed not just in awe, but in relief, in admiration, and in deep, unresolved longing. The audience, tight, enormous, and emotionally volatile, did not stay quiet for a second. Chants of Jin, Jin, Jin erupted constantly, breaking only to sing along in near-perfect Korean. Even during ballads like Abyss and The Astronaut, the fans responded not with silence, but with careful, synchronized chorus. The concert turned into something closer to a spiritual gathering where everyone shared one goal: to uplift Jin as he poured every drop of himself into each note. During an emotional interlude, Jin took a brief pause to look out over the sea of lights. Cameras caught his lips quivering. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't planned. It was raw reaction. The weight of standing there in a foreign land after military service, carrying the pressure of BTS and the hopes of ARMY around the world, had momentarily landed on his shoulders, and he carried it with grace. No translator was needed to interpret the silence that followed. The air hung heavy with meaning, as he transitioned into Super Tuna. The atmosphere burst open with joy. The playful choreography, which might seem out of place in a high-pressure setting, only intensified the emotion. Why? Because it reminded the crowd that Jin is not just a serious artist, he is human. He is the same man who once joked about fish and danced in a sailor suit, and yet now commands a stadium with just his voice and presence. The contrast was overwhelming, and fans reacted accordingly, screaming lyrics, waving plush tunas, and crying through laughter. But perhaps the most unforgettable moment came when Jin performed The Astronaut. As the final chorus soared, a surprise visual played behind him. Real images from his enlistment, fan letters, and brief clips of the other BTS members watching his rehearsal footage. Gasps filled the arena. People clutched their chests. It was no longer a concert. It was a confession. And Jin, through his voice, apologized, thanked, and loved. All at once. The second night in Newark wasn't a repeat of day one. It was something wholly different. The vocals were sharper. The emotions ran deeper. And the audience, though the same in number, responded with a wildness that bordered on cathartic release. Why was this night different? Because on this night, Jin wasn't simply performing. He was reclaiming something, a part of himself, a connection with ARMY, a place in music that cannot be replaced, even by the most polished industry machines. Security reported crowd members fainting from emotion, not heat. Fans held each other as tears flowed uncontrollably. And yet through it all, Jin stood tall. His final bow was long, deliberate, and filled with unspeakable gratitude. He didn't need to say anything. Every part of his performance had already said it all. I'm here, I'm back, and I've never sung like this before. What does this mean for Jin's future? If day 2 in Newark is any indicator, it means something seismic is shifting in the industry. Solo concerts from BTS members have always drawn attention, but this one felt like something else. Not just a concert, not even a celebration. It was a reckoning, a reawakening of Jin's place in the cultural narrative, not just as the eldest BTS member, but as an elite vocal powerhouse who has yet to peak. Newark wasn't just the setting. It became the proof that ARMY is still burning with devotion. The proof that Jin's artistry, far from fading, has only sharpened. And the proof that when Jin sings, the world listens, no matter how far, how quiet, or how long it's been. In a world already saturated with noise, Jin's voice in Newark cut through like a blade, sharp, emotional, and unforgettable. The echoes from Prudential Center will not fade easily, because when 19,000 hearts beat for one man, the world takes notice. And if this is only the beginning of Jin's solo renaissance, then what's coming next might be too powerful to predict. As the house lights began to rise and the final notes of The Astronaut lingered like vapor in the air, not a single person moved. It was as if time itself had paused to process what had just taken place. Jin, now standing silently at the center of the stage, lowered his mic and looked out once more across the sea of trembling light sticks. His chest visibly rose and fell. And then, with a single nod and an unspoken gaze that pierced through the thick wall of sound and emotion, he exited the stage. No encore was needed. The impact had already been made. Anything more would have risked breaking the fragile emotional state that enveloped the arena. What, then, explains the unparalleled intensity of Jin Live in Newark Day 2? Was it merely the result of meticulous planning, vocal training, and perfected stage design? Or was there something less tangible, something that transcended technique, something that even Jin himself may not fully understand? Many in the audience would argue the latter, because what they witnessed was not only a concert, but an unfolding of an emotional truth long buried by military silence, public distance, and the sheer enormity of BTS's legacy. It's critical to note that Jin didn't rely on elaborate visuals or explosive pyrotechnics. There were no surprise guests, no high-budget gimmicks. He didn't need them. What he offered was more rare and far more potent: raw vocal precision, refined musicality, and emotional integrity. He exposed himself on that stage, not physically, but vocally, emotionally, and spiritually. And in a music industry often accused of glossing over substance for spectacle, Jin's performance was a seismic return to the essence of live music. From a technical standpoint, Jin's vocals were nothing short of masterful. Each run was clean, his vibrato steady, and his transitions between chest and head voice seamless. During Tonight, his voice took on a fragile, trembling quality that added dimension to already heartbreaking lyrics. In Yours, he exercised restraint so delicate it left the crowd in stunned silence, hanging on his every breath. The nuances in his phrasing didn't just demonstrate control, they revealed layers of sorrow, hope, and longing that words alone could never express. The most telling evidence of his impact came not just in applause, but in the aftermath. Fans who had attended Day 1 returned with handmade signs, Messages like, "You carried us through the silence. Your voice saved me," and "Never leave the stage again." For many, this wasn't just a musical performance, it was healing. One fan was seen openly sobbing into their partner's shoulder, whispering, "I didn't know how much I needed to hear him live again." Outside the arena, conversations continued well into the night. Fans huddled in circles, not partying, but sharing how they felt. "He sang directly into my soul," one attendee said, hands still shaking. It wasn't just his range, it was his pain. You could feel everything he's been through. Others reflected on how different this show felt compared to other BTS solo performances. "This wasn't just a show," one fan noted. "It was an exhale after holding our breath for 2 years." Back inside the venue, production crew members were reportedly stunned by the crowd's response. "We've hosted hundreds of shows," one anonymous technician shared. "But this one? You could feel the floor moving. And it wasn't from the bass, it was from the screaming. That kind of energy isn't normal. It's once in a career." The question now looms. What does this night mean for the future of Jin's solo career? Is Newark simply a midpoint in the Seokjin_EP tour, or is it a sign that Jin's artistry has reached a new frontier, one where he no longer needs the collective identity of BTS to command global attention? Judging by the reaction, the industry should prepare for a major shift. Jin's solo presence is no longer a side project. It is a main act, with the power to sell out arenas, silence skeptics, and rewrite expectations. And what of those watching from afar? Global armies who couldn't attend in person flooded social media with reactions, video snippets, and emotional breakdowns. Translations of fan accounts from Newark went viral in multiple languages within hours. "I've seen BTS live," one international fan wrote. "But tonight felt different. Jin has evolved. He's become something even more magnetic." Indeed, the power of Newark wasn't just local. It reverberated across oceans and time zones. Fan projects were immediately launched to commemorate the night. Photo books, charity donations in Jin's name, and even academic essays dissecting his vocal techniques. Scholars of K-pop and music theorists alike began circulating analyses of his vocal lines from the performance. This was no ordinary concert. It was a case study in how one voice, when paired with sincerity and history, can move multitudes. T.O. called Jin's Newark performance a success would be an understatement. It was an awakening, not only for Jin himself, stepping back into the public sphere after a season of enforced silence, but for the global fan community, who rediscovered the sheer gravity of his presence. He didn't need a BTS reunion to shine. He needed only a microphone, a stage, and the will to bare his soul to thousands. The crowd may have dispersed, but the emotional residue remains. Newark became a monument to vocal power, artistic bravery, and emotional resilience. And Jin, standing alone yet never lonely, proved once again that when he sings, the world stands still. This is not the end of the Seokjin_EP tour. But if every city meets him with a fire that Newark did, then something far greater is underway. The industry will take note. Fellow artists will pay attention. And audiences around the world will come to understand what Newark now knows with certainty. Jin isn't just back. He is transformed.